Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here to review Christine from 1983. So I don't know what it is with me wanting to go on and cover so many Stephen King movies. I don't know if I'm going on and just completing a set at this point, or if I'm just going to go on and realize that I probably understand like the quality that I'm getting and really just saying like, all right, like let's continue to just keep uh figuring other ways of which to just find some interesting films out of just a similar avenue, which is to be Stephen King. Or really, I'm just kind of looking for more horror films. Not quite sure. But, anyways, Christine, we have to go on and realize that this movie, I feel more so than any other Stephen King film, I feel, could really be a massive essay, I feel, where so much of this movie can be so much dissected and interpreted in your own way, and then so many other people can interpret it in theirs and have a completely different opinion about this same film simply by going on and have me probably state this like sounds all well and good and everything, but then also as if I'm gonna go on and easily tell you that this was definitely a thumbs up film and why bother checking the rest of this out. But I did also have problems with this movie, and those will also be addressed as well. But let me get to this point here. So, firstly, the whole dissection of it. We firstly have to go on and ask ourselves if Arnie is to actually be the hero in this film or not. Because it feels like he's the villainous character because we're not quite sure of that the punishment fits the crime for certain characters. But then also, we're really having me want to go on and think about like the Charlie Sheen Wraith movie. And in that movie, like Charlie Sheen is like clearly the hero in that film. But really, that circumstance is a little bit different than in this film because Charlie Sheen's character had died in the early part of that film. It was more of like a like crow revenge kind of story. But in this one, it is to not be that. If technically you could say that Christine has a soul, and you could say that maybe going on and attemptingly murdering Christine could go on and be like punishment fit the crime, but uh it's an object. It's not a person. But again, uh people can go on and kind of just feel or think whatever they would like to, and that's okay. That's the interpretation of it all. But also, we never even quite know if Arnie is ever really in the car until maybe the very end. And so, also to leave up to like just kind of interpretation is where Arnie's going on and talking to Dennis by the later half of this film, and it's talking about how love is a all-consuming thing, and how there is to be like uh, a thing that is happening that is to go on and realize that Arnie is to see how much uh, love is eating away and how much it eats. And so really I can go on and chalk that up to a number of things. It's like, does Arnie saying that mean that Arnie is to go on and watch all these people getting killed right in front of him? And that is a thing that he's talking about it being a consuming thing, that love is a consuming thing. And so consuming meaning killing all these people, or does really the consuming thing mean that Arnie is going on and losing a bit of his soul or a bit of his real true being, the more and more that he is to put himself within this car, and hence why more and more he becomes this more lesser and lesser kind of innocent, pure person the further and further he gets into this car and is to go on and become possibly more evil, even though we still have to question that evilness. Yeah, uh, to almost have us possibly think that maybe Arnie, the more he is to be kind of fused with this car and maybe go through every bit of this, can make us go on and realize that this may be some kind of weird Ghost Rider situation or be some kind of thing where Arnie can kind of live throughout all of what's going on here because he is to go on and be so fused with the car that he is again losing a good chunk of humanity, almost like how Venom and Eddie Brock were fused together in the Venom films, and Eddie started to realize that the symbiote was killing him, and so I was like, okay, like there's a lot of interesting stuff here to just go on and just dissect alone, and hopefully I'm not going to go on and take way too much of anyone's time. But then also, let me go on and talk about some of the problems that I had with this movie to just kind of push forward here. Because I feel when we go into actual spoiler talk, spoiler talk, and I break some certain things down, I feel I can go on and kind of address some other kind of things when they occur within me talking about the movie. And there could be some debate going on within how people are to feel or dress or whatever about this film. Also, the problems that I have with this movie, and some people may have way more problems than I do, it's okay because at the end of the day, then I can go on and to have realized, oh yeah, I didn't I didn't quite have that thing like process in my brain, but hey, you thought of it, so good for you. But hey, the problems that I had with this movie, first off, right here, we have Arnie not wearing glasses after a certain point. Why? Is he wearing contact lenses? Does he not need the glasses because maybe those were reading glasses? Yeah. Uh, how is it that he all of a sudden just doesn't need glasses anymore? And where was that ever to have been written away within any part of this film? And then again, at one point, Lee goes on the girl that is to be the kind of main girl in this. Lee is to go on and call up Dennis. How does she have his phone number? When was that ever stated within any part of this film? Again, hole number two. And then also, Dennis clearly has a girl throughout this entire movie that is to seemingly be like, man, how can I get this guy's attention? Like, how would I jump his bones? Because so that way he can look at me and be with me and whatever. But instead, Dennis is like, no, I want to get the one girl that I can't get. Does anybody see the problem in that? But then also, I can also understand because Dennis is turning to all of his friends, and his friends are just like, oh my god, this girl is perfect. She's hot. She's this, she's that. And maybe consistently all of that talking and also having this be the girl that Dennis can't get could just be the one thing that it's like, I just gotta give me some of that girl. I gotta give me some of that Lee. And I can understand that, but still, like, this girl, I think her name is Roseanne, the girl who's Presley. she really goes on, and she is just so much like, God, if I can just have Dennis just like ask me out, I would just say yes a million times. Why doesn't this girl just go on and just talk to this guy at any point in the movie? And she doesn't. She doesn't at all. And then like Dennis just goes on and just goes with this girl, and I'm assuming like the stuff that they have just kind of been through together just pushes them to end up together by the end of this tale, because that isn't to exactly be confirmed. But trauma will probably lead to loving, I guess. Anyways, kind of like loving is an all-consuming thing. But so we also had the detective, and his name is Junkus. Why? We really could have honestly had Darnell, the do-it-itself garage owner guy. His name could have been Junkus, and maybe it would have been that, maybe wildly enough, like his great 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 grand ancestor was to have been the person who invented junkyards or whatever, and maybe that would have been all the more reason for that character to have had that name for whatever goofy reason. Maybe that's why they called it Junk. I don't know. But if anything, I think Junkus could have probably more fit the Darnell's character than uh than the detective. That didn't quite make any sense to me. But other than that, uh there is a lot of character names that I'm not gonna quite be sure if I'm gonna remember them all, but God, there is a lot of them. But yeah, so with that all to be stated, now of course I need to go on and eventually give you a grading of this film, and go on and tell you where it's going to eventually be located on, and so on and so forth, to eventually also need to tee up this film and go on and then get to full on spoilers. So, uh, my grading of this film, and then we'll tee up the film. Regardless, I'm sure that the teeing up may be a mood point, but especially after I grade it. But grading this movie, I would have to say that it's a good film. Again, because I have a lot of problems with it, and also there's a lot of stuff to have to self-interpret of what people are going on and actually stating in this film. And like there is at some point some cool lines, but then also I'm realizing like also like how like interesting they are, and how also dark they are. Like especially when we have Arnie, who is going on and talking about how being a parent is like killing your kids. And I was like, man, like in some ways I think people can go on and probably like feel of that quote in a number of different ways. Some people may go on and be like, wow, that is like the darkest thing ever. But then also some people could probably understand and possibly like in some ways like connect with that. I don't know. Like there's a lot of stuff to just dissect in this film. There's a lot of stuff. Uh but yeah, so it is a I'm gonna go on and state that it's a good film. It is a good film. Um I feel that also there is a lot of rip-off things of this film, which could probably lessen its just overall appeal. Like I said, there is kind of like the Charlie Sheen Wraith movie where you're questioning whether Arnie is good or bad or an anti-hero or whatever. And also there could be like Shriek, I Know What You Did Last Friday the 13th, which is to also just kind of mimic or try to be uh, a ripping off a little skit of that film is to be kind of ripping off this movie in a very comedic way. There probably is also just a number of other just movies where a vehicle or car kills people. There, of course, is The Car or The Car Road to Revenge, or there is also like Maximum Overdrive or The Car Trucks, or the movie Trucks is to also be like another one of those kind of. So yeah, there is a lot of these kinds of movies that exist out there, and without a doubt, I think it's also time to go on and tell you where you can go on and see Christine specifically if you want to go on and check it out for absolutely free. Because ultimately, I think you're gonna have to go on into other apps you probably have to dare. In fact, probably have a subscription for, or yada yada yada. And no, don't do any of that nonsense. So I'm going to go on and tell you that you can go on to an app called Zelifonic, Zelivonic. You can go on to a Google Play Store, search this app. It should be possibly available, I'm assuming, compared to the second this recording on the Google Play Store. Check out this app, download it, be able to see Christine for absolutely free. There may go on to be a plethora of other bootleggish like apps to dare in fact be able to see a plethora of other kind of content as well. But logically, just check out Zelifonic. You'll get a good portion of content you wouldn't be able to see anywhere else. Besides a subscription feed app. But anyways. Yeah. So teeing this movie up, what exactly it's to be about. So we have Dennis and Arnie, and they're to be like just kind of the normal high school film. And it is kind of really interesting with that also because I am to probably have stated that I probably don't like a lot of high school movies. But it's weirdly enough that this is to be like a thumbs up thing, and it deals with like basically high schoolish like subjects. But then also, I am to really question the age of any number of these actors because any number of them probably don't actually look like high school students. They really don't. To me, I'm like that guy looks 30, and this guy looks uh like obviously like in his late 20s. Like none of these people actually look like 16 or 17-year-old freaking kid. They don't. They really don't. But anyways, Arnie, Dennis, they're going through their seemingly high schoolish lives, and Dennis is to turn to Arnie like, hey man, like maybe you should probably actually try to get laid this year. And Arnie's like, yeah, I don't know about that. And so Dennis and Arnie kind of go through their high schoolish days to come to find that they are to be bullied by this guy named Buddy. And I know that they end up going on and focusing on his last name, but I'm just going to go on and call him by his first name so I won't completely consistently mess up that last name consistently. Buddy is the guy with the knife in this film, the switchblade. And so that's what I'm going to call him through this whole thing. And then also on IMDb, they just call him Buddy also. So if anything, that is to be the kind of quick and easy like assessment of like I'm just gonna call him Buddy because it's easy. Then trying to actually figure out what his last name was within the rollout of this movie. But anyways, we have of course Arnie that stumbles upon this car with Dennis while driving from school to make their way home. And Arnie seems to have somehow saved up. I think it was like $300. Like they kind of set in between $250 to $300, and they were saying how that's like a lot for a car. I'm like, man, like this was in like early 80s. Like, man, you would have to drop like thousands of dollars on a car. When of course I was to have been a person who had gone on to buy a car, and eventually that ended up going the way it did. But Logically, I'm just like, man, if you could have paid like a couple $100 for a car, man, you are freaking made. And have it actually run and actually have it like seem to like be able to be a thing that you could probably quickly fix up, or in Arnie's case, drop a lot of money in and then have it seemingly really be like eventually a brand new, almost looking car. Man, that just seems miraculous. But so Arnie then goes on to have this car, and he is to get his confidence up because of this car, which then lands him to meet up with the new girl in town. Because in every single high school story, there always has to be a new character in town. There always has to be this ever written idea is to even make its way onto a Stephen King novel. God, do I just hate this idea? And if you were to ever go on and see any movie that I've ever done a high schoolish thing in, I always gripe about that. I always do. But again, they keep doing it. Even in this thing, there is a character that is to be brand new, making their way into school. Anyways, let's move on. Let's. I can't just like shake my hands at that quick enough. But still, we have Arnie that ends up with this new girl in town, Lee, and that all of a sudden is to start to create friction between both Dennis and Arnie. And friction only because Dennis was trying to ask out this girl, but she was like, well, no, I'm dating somebody. And then that someone ends up being Arnie. So, really, like the way that this almost plays out, like, could we say that, like, was this Dennis, like, really having this to be some master stroke of plan all along? Really, like, should have Dennis stepped in a lot earlier and realized that something was really wrong with what it was to have all happened with Arnie, and he should have just, like, put a stop to it all before it became too late? Or again, like, was this just some master stroke of like, well, hey, now Arnie, I'm sure is gonna have with this car, like something is gonna turn out wrong, and I'm gonna end up with this girl in my lap. What I wanted at the tail end of this anyway. So ha ha, yay! And then also like Dennis, even in the early parts of this film, having Arnie like in trouble with those guys, like was Dennis thinking probably all along in the back of his mind that like yeah, like I'm sure this is gonna just not work out for Arnie. Like there's so much about this where I'm just like, can Arnie in some ways be the hero of this film? And then also like could he also be like the Anakin Skywalker of this movie, which is kind of very interesting and just kind of a comparison of a Star Wars thing and also this movie. But anyways, so yeah, so Arnie, Dennis, like there starts to become a conflict between the two, and Arnie will not let go of this car, regardless of how he is to consistently spend so much money within it, because eventually he is to just be defiant and just be like, oh, no, 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 no. Like, you guys want me to get rid of this car, so I'm not going to. And also, like, how can you not pass up a car that regenerates itself and is to always be good to go when you are to just sweet talk it into doing so? Because at some points, Arnie would go on and be with Lee, and the car all of a sudden stalls because it's possibly jealous. And the car has its own kind of feelings, and it expresses that by not going on and performing well for Arnie. And so, yeah, so eventually this all leads with a big, massive face off between a car and a bulldozer. And really, at the end of it all, like, that is to be just a very slow and simple, like, battle, but then again, also, man, it's just like they somehow figured out how to go on and give us this just like interesting approach to all this, when really, like, this movie could be just so hard to also have put together. So give him all the praise of that, but then also realize that probably a lot of this is to have come from the writer originally, and giving them such an easy blueprint to know where to go with this movie. But yeah, so with all of that said, and spending 26 minutes to do so, I'm probably have to gonna be forced to, like, when we get to full on spoilers, have to rush through a lot of this film, knowing that it's like an hour and 50 minutes, and I've already spoken for 26. God, this is gonna probably take for freaking ever. So let's go on. Let's force our way into spoiler time, because it's about that time yet again, to have me do the song and dance, and then to pause this video to get out my phone with the notes, or the cast list, or whatever I insist to help me figure out who is to be who within this movie. Without further ado, because there is just a lot of people, there's a lot of cast lists, there's a lot of stuff to just talk about. So, and that's it. It is spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time I'm going to spoil this movie. Let me pause here. Let me get this stuff out. All right. One thing that I also wanted to state was, like, about Arnie's parents. This is gonna be the last thing, and then we'll get into the whole thing here. So Arnie's parents, it seemed that they were trying to go on and be going out of their way to be the very opposite of supportive. Even to the point where Arnie, and I'm sure, like, people can go on and relate for this anyways, like, oh yeah, well, when I had my very first car, like, I had to put my own money down, which that's what I did too. Like, put your own money down on your own car and continue to make payments on that car. And then some people may have gone on and had their parents go on and buy their car for them. Not quite sure, but anyways, whichever you are to be in that camp. But like, we had Arnie go on and he got his own money for his own car, and then turning around, like, his parents are like, why did you have him get that car? So he could be his own person. As well as Arnie going on and turning to his parents like, yeah, you don't want to let me be my own man. And then also further and further, like, everything that was going on with Arnie, like, they didn't want to support him at all. If anything, they were also just kind of forcing him to do, like, these certain things. Like, he's like, well, yeah, like, I joined the chess team instead of band and this and that. And so it's like, yeah, like, they weren't supportive of him, but then also they were kind of controlling of what he was like. Man, like, so much about this was just so interesting. Just again, like, just so much to just dissect here. That's why it took me freaking almost 30 minutes to go on and get to this point. But so, anyways, more discussion could be had with this, Dave, within the comments down below. Let me know your thoughts upon this movie, and just let it run wild. And eventually, I'll probably go on and maybe comment. There was at one point, I feel like, some eventual, like, people that I should probably go on uh and look further into. But a lot of times, also, there's quite often notifications that I don't get. So who knows? But anyways, let's go on and let's just go into this film. So this, of course, is Detroit in 1957. So we have this assembly line of all these cars, and seemingly out of every single one of these cars, there seems to be only one red car. I wonder who's going to be the Christine of this movie, the only red car. So maybe they were going on and they were trying to figure out like what color scheme of this car should be the color scheme. But then again, also like you'd have to assess that it was probably going to end up being red. But anyways, uh, we have one of the assembly line workers who's going on popping open the the hood of this car, and the hood ends up slamming back down on this guy's hand. And so this doctor is now there, just kind of hauling this guy away, who's now wrapped up his hand. We also go on and have another assembly line worker who just goes into the car and is to just have this cigarette and or this cigar, and he just lets a bit of the ash just kind of fall onto the seat. So after it seems that either everybody is going either on break or leaving for the day, we have another person that goes on and makes their way into this same car. There must just be something about this car that like just draws people in. There must be just some to like ratio or circumference like just appeal to the car. I'm not quite sure. But so one man goes on and is to open up this car to then have the guy who had the cigar fall out of it. It's like, okay, another dead body, honk, honk, honk. So we then turn around and have some time passing into 1978 at Rock Ridge, California. Rock Ridge, it wasn't the normal setting that is to be through every one of these other uh, Stephen King films, because I think there is also like Castle Rock or whatever that seems to be the common setting for every single one of these things, to the point to them going on and even having that one show. Anyways, moving on. So we have Dennis making his way to Arnie's place, and as Dennis is kind of waiting, we have Arnie's mother going on and stating to Dennis how he's kind of leaving the car running, and how like there's toxic pollutants kind of coming out of this car, and this and that, and like all about protecting the environment, yada yada yada. So Arnie makes his way now scrambling, and he all of a sudden is to completely drop the entire bag of trash, having it all fall out. And so Arnie's mother is like, well, hey, I'll go on and I'll take care of this. Like, you just go on, here's your lunch, go to school. So Dennis and Arnie are talking here, and so Arnie is going on and talking about how he's taking on shop, and he doesn't care what his parents are saying, like he wants to take that class. And Dennis is like, well, yeah, like it actually is a good thing, because if anything, like at some point, like if there ever is like a car problem, like you can just fix it for free. And Arnie's like, well, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And so Arnie also goes on and he talks about playing Scrabble with his folks, because this guy doesn't have friends beyond just Dennis here. And so Arnie goes on and is to talk about how he uh, was to, instead of putting down the word ratio, he instead says fellatio. And like his mother doesn't go on to give him the points, because she's just to be like, well, I don't like how you use like an inappropriate kind of word. But I thought that was also just kind of funny to mention here. So that goes on and turns around and has Dennis saying like, you know what, like if anything, maybe this year, like maybe you should go on and definitely try to get laid here. Like especially with me hearing you going on, it's been a lot of time with your parents. Like, hey man, like I'm just looking out for you, man. Like I just want you to get some women under your belt, if you know what I mean. Not like saying that like that women are notches under belts. I'm not saying that. Don't get it twisted, everybody. Freaking ladies in all of their glory are an amazing thing. Also, like if you're also just into dudes, it's okay at the end of the day. Whatever boat that you float, it's all good. I don't know what the heck that really meant, but hopefully somebody could figure it out. So Arnie is like, well, hey, you need a girl to get laid. And Dennis is like, well, what about Gail Justin? And so Arnie's like, oh, Gail, just in case. I don't like mustaches. Hey, at least you'll get some kind of just if you got some stash, then hey, like stash on stash contact. But anyways, uh, we go on and like, well, what do you care if a little hair is in your mouth? Exactly, especially if you're going downtown, if you know what I mean. What does it matter? And then it's like, well, hey, how about Sally Hayes? She's cute. She's a sophomore. So what? She's a walking sperm bank, Arnie. So I don't think I have a minimum deposit to open an account. Are you kidding? You're carrying your life savings between your legs. I think maybe I'll just beat off. So much about this. So much about this early dialogue was so fun. It was great. Because also she was talking about walking sperm bank and then life savings between your legs. Just a lot of just great repartee between the two of them. But anyways, let's move on here. So we have Chuck that is going on and talking to Dennis here about like, well, hey man, like you ready to like to hit the field kind of thing? Are you ready to play football this year? And Dennis is like, yeah, like uh gotta pick up your fumbles and this that. So uh Chuck is psyched that Dennis is gonna go on and play this year, and so he leaves, and then all of a sudden Roseanne, the girl who's Presley, and is like, "Oh, hi, Dennis," through a good chunk of this film, and is trying as desperately as possible to really just get the attention of Dennis, who doesn't give her the time of day. So yeah, her name is Roseanne. So the common conversation of like, oh hey, how's it going? Oh, I'm okay. I'm gonna oh, I'm okay. They gonna let you play football this year? Yeah, Doc says I'm good as new. Then I guess I'll see you out there. Yeah, you'll be just seeing him, but what else are you gonna be doing? Nothing. I hope so, Roseanne. Well, TTFN. Yeah, ta for now. Immediately when they said TTFN, I'm like, what the heck does that mean? And then eventually when Dennis is like, okay, ta for now, I'm like, oh, okay, that's what that meant. Why not just say TTFN, like what that actually meant? Again, that is like the people that do all the abbreviations, the LOLs and the whatevers, and I'm just like, okay, all right, you could have just said laugh out loud, okay, whatever. Like, you could have just been like, oh, that was a funny anecdote, whatever. Moving on. If you are to be a one that abbreviates, like logically, if I am to go on and decipher and what the heck that is, then I know what LOL means. I'm not that stupid, but like really, like the whole abbreviation thing, just I don't know. Not that I would kick anybody out of bed for doing so, but still. Uh so Bemis comes in here. Bemis and Butthead. Bemis comes in here, and so he starts going on and talking about how he just went on uh to see the new girl in school, and he's in love and she's perfect, and so they're talking about how, like, hey, yeah, you know how fussy I am. Yeah, I never noticed you were fussy. I should probably go on and use fussy a lot more in my everyday dialogue, but like I've never really heard the word fussy until now. No one has ever said the word fussy to me because that just seems like a weird, unusual word that eventually a lot of people were like, "What the heck does fussy mean?" So, but also he's going on to say that this woman has a body of a slut, which I'm like, you could just say that she's freaking beautiful, man. Like you didn't have to say that. F that noise. No, no. And so here she comes to save the day. Uh, so we have, I think, this like principal guy going on and talking to Lay here. It's like, oh, I think you're gonna like it here. Uh, like, oh, this isn't a bad way to meet boys. And Bemis is wanting to go on and having something to just cover his lap because he's having a boner because this girl is just walking by. So Lay is going on and asking this I'm assuming principal like figure, like, oh hey, like uh can I get involved with the yearbook? And he's like, oh well yeah, like there's a terrific yearbook staff. Uh it won a prize last year. Prize for what? Like yearbook committees don't go to state, do they? What awards do they have for yearbook people? Let me know in the comments below if you know anything about that. Maybe they win for like just like an editorial. I don't know. I'm going way too much in the weeds with this. So the guys are trying to sound like smart guys while she's passing by, but really that is just to go on and be stupid. Uh, but Bemis is like, oh my god, she smiled at me. I want to have a deep, meaningful sex with her. Like, oh yeah, you go right ahead, Bemis. Uh, like, oh, I think I should. You've got nothing to lose but your virginity. uh, so, uh, so Arnie is having trouble with his locker, and then Dennis helps him. But then again, as Arnie goes on and closes his locker, he again has trouble with his locker. So some time has passed, I'm assuming, and so Arnie is now in shop class, and so Dennis is going on and asking a friend of his named Charlie, it's like, well, hey, have you seen Arnie? And Charlie ends up saying, well, yeah, he's still in shop. What's the matter? Uh, and so Buddy Repperton has his lunch. And it's like, oh, Buddy Repperton? And so because knowing that Buddy is, I'm assuming, the school bully, it's like, oh no, this is going to turn out really well. And again, we have Roseanne who's like, hi, Dennis. Yeah, you should have easily gone with that lady, but no, you decided no, 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 no. I'm gonna go with the woman that is probably hard to get. That eventually you're not gonna get that woman at the end of this tale. You probably won't. But then again, who knows? They didn't show them just kissing or anything intimate whatsoever. So they really could have been really good friends, and then Dennis would have ended up with that girl anyways. Moving on. So Dennis makes his way into the shop class, consistently hearing the words pizza face. So this ends up getting in a kerfuffle or a fight between both Dennis and Arnie and Buddy and the guys that Buddy is, of course, friends with, who is to end up being guys like Rich, Moochie, and uh, Vanderberg, Vandenberg. So what ends up happening is that Buddy ends up taking a switchblade, a knife, and he stabs into Arnie's lunch bag and cuts the bottom of it, and all the stuff falls out of it, and most of it is just the yogurt. So, as it seems that Buddy is looking for a fight, it seems between Arnie and Dennis, the only two people that are going to go on and actually to be even close to having a chance to fight Buddy here is to probably be Dennis out of the two. So, but also, Dennis is not completely stupid, and he calls for Mr. Casey, this teacher, the shop teacher. So, for one of his friends to go on and reach out to him. So, Dennis goes on to try to want to go up against Buddy here, and immediately he gets tripped by Rich and Moochie here. And as Arnie is to kind of step up here, he slips on the yogurt and he falls over. So there's a number of people that are going on and telling Buddy to kind of stick it to these guys. But instead, it seems that Dennis gets back up and is to punch Buddy, and Buddy goes flying into these boxes. And then Moochie grabs Dennis from behind and grabs his nuts and grabs his like underneath his chin and is kind of performing this almost kind of like choke crotch maneuver thing. It's very weird. I don't know why he grabbed for the guy's junk. That just seems very weird, Moochie. What are you trying to do here? Maybe just going on and trying to go for the weak point to just make him fall quickly. But anyways, he calls him a dick face also. Okay, all right. So the blade is on the ground and gets retrieved by Buddy here, as Mr. Casey ends up coming back into the fold here, and he's telling a lot of the kids like, "Well, hey, take a walk, get lost," and but the guys who are just gonna be involved in this fight, they were to be the ones that stuck around. So, of course, Casey is wanting to go on and be like, okay, who started this? How did this all happen? And is to get certain point of views of people. And Casey, of course, immediately sides uh, with Dennis and Arnie here, even to the point where now Casey is to be asking Buddy here. It's like, okay, like, where's the blade? Like, take it out. And so Buddy used to go on and be the cliche-ish villainous character that's like, they're lying, don't believe anything they're saying, come on, come on. And he eventually is to be forced uh to show the blade. It's like, all right, well, you guys are going to the principal's office, like the cliche-ish uh kind of school thing. And really, Casey is to have a good point here, where if Buddy doesn't go on and show the blade, that Casey's just gonna call the cops and force Buddy to show the blade. So, uh, anyways, moving on. So Buddy is to, of course, be very upset with uh, both Arnie and Dennis because of that, and so he's gonna need to figure out a way to get even with them. So Arnie and Dennis are going on, and they're in their car, and they're talking about like, well, uh, man, like we made a really bad first day, and Arnie is thinking like, well, like I'm sure like Buddy later is gonna try to get even, and Dennis is like, no, like I think he's just some douchebag. So and Dennis is just thinking like, well, yeah, he'll probably forget about us and he'll move on, which he won't. So also, it seemed that Buddy, as well as his friends, had gone on and gotten kicked out. So really, again, oh wait. Buddy got kicked out, and I think the other friends got probation, whatever that means. School probation. Seems like everybody's going to be getting probation eventually in this film, even though there isn't any real reason for them to go on and get probation. But, anyways, moving on. So, while they're driving, all of a sudden Arnie is to notice some car off in the distance, forcing Dennis to then back up so he can go on and see exactly what that is. So, they all of a sudden see this kind of very uh, aged, very just kind of not taken care of well patch of land, which is to also lead them to make their way to this car that seems to be not very well taken care of, but it also has a for sale sign on it. So Arnie makes his way to this car and he's like, oh my god, this is a great looking car. And Dennis is like, no, it's a piece of like it's a piece of crap. So Arnie is just seeing so much potential in this, and he's like, "Well, hey, it could be a fixer-upper, but hey, uh, why wouldn't it?" So they look at the speedometer and they realize that there's 93,000 miles on it, and they're like, "Oh my god, like man, this has probably been driven into the ground." So Dennis is thinking that it won't even start. Here's where we go on, and we have the guy who owns the car, who actually technically inherited the car, who is to be LeBay, who I believe his first name is George in this film, because I think they said his full name is to be George LeBay, I believe. But I'm just gonna call him LeBay, even though it could have just been so easy to just say George. But so LeBay goes on and is to be so easy to hand over these keys, as well as also just giving them just a couple $100 to buy this car, and even bargaining to only buy it for possibly $250. So we have LeBay that is going on and asking Arnie, it's like, well, hey, have you owned a car before? And Arnie's like, well, no, but I have a license. And so the further and further that LeBay is looking at Arnie, it's like there's something about this kid where like he is gonna want to go on and want this car, like regardless of what I have anything to say about it. And if anything, Dennis later is like wanting to return to LeBay to like want the Carfax of this car and want the history of it. And like LeBay wasn't going to say anything about anybody dying in that car, but then also again, LeBay is thinking in his brain like this Arnie guy is not going to want to hear any of this stuff. He's just going to be like, I'll take it. I'll take this car. So he starts her up and the car starts. It's going on and just spewing out just uh dust and whatever in the back of it. But anyways, or carbon monoxide or whatever that is at the very tail end of the car. So uh we also had the bay that had talked about like the history of the car a little bit with like stating how um his brother had gone on it and bought the car in September 57, and it was a new model year then, and it was brand new then. Um, but yeah, like doesn't look brand new now, but at some point it will. So, but it's also kind of funny how like a brand new car, LeBay is to say it's like is to be like the best smell in the world, except for maybe some Pussy. And it's funny how they go on and they reconnect that line later in the film. Um, and more than likely, anybody, I don't really know the really smell of a new car. Like, that never really got on to make me, like, think that that is the greatest smell in the world. But maybe that second thing, maybe that second thing I can relate to. Um, anyways, pushing on. So the more and more they're going on and they're talking and they're haggling, um, and talking about the brother who this guy inherited this car off of, because the guy goes on and explains like, well, yeah, like he's stone cold dead. That's why he's selling the car. So and he supposedly died 6 weeks ago. So they go on and they get to the 250. The guy takes it. Dennis is asking Arnie, it's like, well, hey, how do you have money for this? And Arnie's like, well, I've saved up. It's like, all right. So, I'm trying to figure out a way of which to kind of get past this. Uh, and so LeBay ends up talking about, uh, like, you don't know half as much as you think you do. And then he ends up saying the word shitter. And further and further, we have Arnie that just says that word consistently throughout this movie. Whenever he doesn't like anybody, he calls uh, these people that. But I'm going to, as much as possible, try to avoid saying that word because, of course, it's just another cuss word. Um, but then also just trying to avoid it anyways because YouTube and profanity and whatever. But I've already said so many things already. So Arnie goes on and brings his car on home to have his parents go on and be like, well, you did what? Like, why did you buy a car? And, like, his parents want nothing to do with it. And, like, also, they're like, well, hey, like, how are you going to finance this car? And Arnie's like, well, hey, like I am like 17 years old, so hey, with your guys' permission, like I can be able to finance it. And So, if anything, like the parents don't want to go on and even have this car parked anywhere close to their home. So Arnie's like, okay, well, like, all right then, uh, like for every time that Arnie is to ever go on and consult with his parents, and there's always a committee meeting, and he's always outvoted 2-1. So, uh, and so Arnie is now wanting to finally go on and have this be the one thing that he's like, you know what, I'm gonna go on and for this one thing put my foot down. And like there is no meeting, there is no like yes or knowing about this car. I'm gonna have this car and that's it. So the further and further they have this argument, the further Arnie just decides to just like, you know what, like I'm just gonna leave and I'm going to take this car to the do-it-yourself garage, Darnell's do-it-yourself garage. And Arnie turns to Dennis and is like, well, hey, can you honk your horn because my horn doesn't work? And so they make their way into this garage, and we have Darnell, and in the background we have these guys who are playing poker and they're smoking. So Darnell is immediately looking at this car and how it's driving in, and there is a bunch of carbon monoxide that is flying from out the back of it. And so Darnell is like, hey man, like, kill that car as quickly as you can, or we're all gonna choke to death. So we have Darnell here, and he's talking to Dennis. Is like, you seriously had your friend buy this box, this crap box? And Dennis is like, well, hey, I tried to talk him out of it. It's like, yeah, you should have tried to talk him out of it harder. So we have Darnell, and like the slimming of this conversation is to really just have Darnell just not want to have anything to do with Arnie and with Dennis, and just has this ultimatum like, hey, like immediately, like I don't like you guys, like you guys are on probation, and if anything, like the first sign of trouble, like you're out of here. Like I don't care how far in advance you've paid me to keep your car here. I don't care. And also like how like Darnell is saying that like nobody can smoke, but then also Dennis is to kind of look at the poker game that is going on. Like, well, hey, like they're smoking, you're gonna kick them out, and Darnell just looks at him like, you piece of like. So like I guess like there isn't a double standard, I guess, for everybody within this garage. So they go on and like they seem to come up with an agreement with one another, and we have Arnie and Dennis leave here, and so uh here's where Arnie goes on like you you gotta find yourself some other charity besides me and Christine. And Dennis is like, what is it about that car, huh? And Dennis is like, I don't know. Maybe for the first time in my life, I found something that's uglier than me. Uh, and Dennis is like, uh, and no, and Arnie's like, and I know how to fix her up. And Dennis is like, well, you're not ugly, Arnie. And Arnie's like, well, I know what I am. And Dennis is like, queer, maybe, but not ugly. And Arnie's like, F you. And so Arnie goes on and he's to make his way back home. And so Arnie is telling Dennis to leave because he's going to go on and have yet another argument with his parents. So we turn around here and go on to have Arnie that is really spending a lot of time going on and fixing up his car. And so we also come to find that it seems that Darnell and Arnie had made seemingly this arrangement that Arnie can go through and start picking apart his junkyard and finding all these kind of just oddball items to help with his car. And Darnell's not going to go on and just kind of charge him anything. Like if anything at all, it's like, well, hey, like these things are just going to sit there anyway, so this kid might as well just kind of come in and just kind of take these things to just kind of fix up his car. But then finally, Darnell is to have like a just kind of like, well, yeah, like he's really going on and taking a lot of these pieces. And so Darnell is just kind of having like to further like renegotiate and also just say like, well, hey, like Arnie, if it seems that you're really gonna need like a job also, like maybe I can give you that as well. So the big thing that comes from this argument between both Darnell and Arnie, it's like, well, hey, uh like at first it's the whole disagreement that like, well, hey, I didn't want to go on and have you just take all of my junk and this and that. But then Darnell is like, well, hey, like how about I go on and let you do that? But then also if you turn around and just start like cleaning up here or cleaning up around here, like at some point, like replace the toilet paper and this and that. Like maybe I'll go on and I'll just kind of keep you around here and maybe even at some point kind of toss you a couple of bucks. And so Arnie is just kind of looking at his car and is looking at Darnell is like, you know what? Like, I don't really know if I want to take that kind of opportunity. And Darnell is like, well, hey, like you better think it quick or I'm gonna kick you out of here. Like basically saying it's like Arnie has no excuse but to agree to it, but also like it's actually a pretty sweet deal. In all honesty, it's a really good opportunity for Arnie to basically um like do what he is already doing, and then also kind of getting paid for it almost in a way, but having to do some kind of gopher like jobs for Darnell as well, because at some point Darnell is going to consistently have Arnie need to go and find these certain parts at these other locations, and that has forcibly to have Darnell give Arnie uh, Darnell's car, and that at some points goes on and also is to give Arnie an alibi, like, well, hey, like I was driving this other person's car, getting all these parts and this and that, which is actually very clever writing in this whole story of things. But then also there are just certain points where there just really is just clever writing to just kind of write away how uh, we immediately can't think that Arnie is to be just the murderer all the time and this and that. Anyways, if again we are to also have problems in this film. So we have Dennis, Bemis, and Chuck that are all in the library sitting. at a table together, and they're again all talking about uh, like how they're betting on if Lee will give them the time of day. So Dennis is going on, and it seems looking at Roseanne, but then is looking further at Lee. So they're even going on and like saying like, man, I wish I was a racer that I could have Lee chew on me, because that's what she's doing. She's taking the back of this pencil and like, So Dennis goes on, makes his way to a book, which I'm not quite sure what the book is because it's all kind of scratched out. I was hoping there'd be some kind of like Stephen King like Easter eggs in his bookshelf, but I couldn't quite see if there was any, or if there was any actual just kind of Easter egg like things within any part of this bookcase, but I couldn't find any. So Dennis then goes on and is to take this book and is to sit next to Lee and is like, well, hey, what you reading? History. Oh, it's pretty boring, huh? And so Dennis goes on and is to start asking, like, well, hey, like, do you like music? Do you like to dance? Uh, you think maybe we might, uh, the two of us go out dancing or anything? And like maybe like Friday night after the game? And Lee is like, well, I'm sorry, I can't. Why not? I have a date. And so all of a sudden we have the librarian who's like, I'm sorry, Mr. Gilder, are you lost? No, ma'am. Goes back to his seat. So because Arnie, who has now spent so much time in his car, by the time finally when him and Dennis are to kind of re-meet up to go to the movies, yeah, um, that is to all just kind of be kind of rain checked, as Arnie is to go on and state here. He's like, well, yeah, um, yeah, uh, plans had changed, and if anything, I did want to go on and tell you that plans had changed, but I just for whatever reason, just I just couldn't get a hold of you. So, but Dennis is going on and looking at Arnie. It's like, hey, no glasses, you're looking good. And again, like I don't think at all they say like, oh yeah, I'm wearing contact lenses. No, none of it's stated. Um, so, uh, because then, here's where Arnie breaks down that he can't go to the movies. He's like, well, yeah, I meant to call you, but I forgot. Uh, and also we have the mother that is just kind of interrupt and is like, well, hey Arnie, aren't you going with Dennis to the movies? Uh, and Arnie's just like, no, and got to do an errand for Darnell. So yeah, so he's going off. He's using Darnell's car to get all these parts. So and Dennis is like, well, hey, do you need a ride? And Arnie's like, well, no, like I have his car, but thanks though. So let me pause here for a second. Yeah, I just had a moment of just acid reflux or whatever. Ugh. So, uh, that just leaves Arnie's mother and Dennis to have this conversation where, uh, where Arnie's mother is talking to Dennis about how the last person had died from carbon monoxide poisoning. And Dennis is like, "Well, hey, does Arnie know about that?" And and Arnie's mother is like, "Well, like Arnie doesn't know about anything anymore." So that pushes then Dennis to then go on and talk to LeBay about uh the whole thing about like, well, hey, like I heard about your brother like dying in the car. And so LeBay is like, well, you don't know, kid. You don't know nothing. My brother died because he wanted to. He ran a rubber hose from the exhaust pipe. Uh, Arnie would have never bought this if he knew anybody died in it. Even you're dumber than you look, or you don't know your friend well. He had the same look in his eyes my brother always had. Again, hence why LeBay knew that whatever he was to go on and tell Arnie was to just be like in one ear, out the other, because Arnie just wanted this thing, and there was no saying no to him, or no saying anything about it that was going to convince him otherwise. So also come to find out, his brother's 5-year-old daughter uh, also choked to death in the car, but still, like, the guy wouldn't have gone on and gotten rid of that car. Uh, he just rolled around, the radio blaring, not a care except for Christine. That's all he gave a rip about. Only time I interfered with it was when Rita killed herself. And Rita, of course, is to be the guy's wife. So, man, like, this whole family just got decimated by this one car. So, but if anything, the brother didn't really care at all about Rita because, again, he still had that car. But also, she died the exact same way he did, or the brother did. So, but if anything, LeBeau or LeBay tried to have his brother get rid of the car for just decency's sake. Uh, but if anything, the car returned to the owner, so there was no getting rid of it. And Dennis is like, "Wait a minute! Like, it came back." It's like, yeah, like the car has a mind of its own. Like, really, just saying like this guy needed to figure out a way to just get rid of this car, and so he just so easily wanted to hand it off to Arnie so he could finally get rid of it, or otherwise he would have just thought that it was going to go on and probably kill him, uh, because he is technically the owner. So all the more reason to just hand it off as quickly as he could to Arnie, anyways, because it's like, heck yeah, like get rid of this, uh, so someone else will have it, and then someone else will have to deal with the problems of that car. So Dennis goes on and tries to sneak into the garage late at night to trying to get into the car, and all of a sudden the radio ends up going on in the car and ends up going and cranking really loud, and that leads Dennis to then turn around and be like, oh my god, like I can't get into the car, like the car's radio is going off, like I don't want anybody calling the police after this, so I'm gonna go on and sneak back out. So football game. We have football game going on, and so it seems that Dennis is to go on and be the wide receiver, it seems here. Or maybe they're going on and kind of doing the uh like some kind of goofy play here. So Arnie is to make his way with Christine, and it is to look pretty dang good at this point. Like the paint and everything just looks freaking awesome. And so we come to find that Arnie not alone within his car. He's also to have at his side Lee with him. So we have Moochie, we have Buddy, we have Rich, we have Vandal Burke or whatever his goofy name is, uh, going on, and they're all four of them like all at the bleachers, and they're like, "Oh my God, is that Arnie's car?" And Moochie's like, "Well, yeah, like I know where he leaves it, or I know where he keeps it." So they go on, and so Dennis and his team are doing the play, and it seems that he's going to go on and need to catch this ball, but Dennis is just so utterly distracted by Arnie and Lee just making out and being together that Dennis doesn't really go on and completely concentrate at what is to be at hand, which is to be him catching this football and to not get injured and killed here. But it seems, sadly enough, as Dennis to look up at this ball, he ends up getting horribly tackled, which leads him, of course, ending up getting injured. It seems again. Or maybe he was just sick or something before. Maybe he had mono. I don't know. Which led him to miss out on the last football season. Not quite sure. But, anyways, we then have this to be November 5th. So, because we're going to go on and eventually start to see bizarrely that there's just months and dates here. I don't know why, but it's, I guess, to just showcase that there's just a lot of time passing. Maybe logically, for every chapter of said book, maybe there was to actually have been like a certain like month or date to just connected chapters. Not really sure. But anyways, because I didn't really actually read the book because I'm a visual person. Books are really hard for me to really grasp and whatever. But speaking of grasping, um, Arnie is with Dennis at the hospital. Hey, Arnie. Uh, and so Arnie goes on and brings Dennis a present, which is 5,000 Dirty Limericks books, a book. And so Arnie's like, well, yeah, I thought this book might keep you busy for a while. And also, like, this is to have supposedly been, um, like, the third time that Arnie had tried to talk or to be here with uh, Dennis, but every single time, like, there was times where he took sedatives or drugs or whatever and fast asleep. So, but also Dennis is to say to Arnie, it's like, well, yeah, but it just still doesn't like really like kill the pain. Like so, like it just makes him sleepy probably. There's sometimes when I had gone on and I had taken certain like pain pills, and like some of them didn't go on and hit me at all. But then eventually there was at one point where like it had made me like really sick at one time. And I was like, okay, like that really sucked. So like it didn't really kill any of the pain, but then also it just made me just want to just hurl. So I'm like, wow, like that painkiller just freaking sucks. But anyways, let me go on. Uh, Dennis, I feel finally at this point is to realize that he's probably never going to play football again, ever. uh, and then also like a centimeter one way or the other, like he could be paralyzed from the waist down. And so immediately here is where we have the whole crapper thing, which is actually to be the shitter is full kind of thing. The shitter. Uh, shitter did some job on you, huh? Uh, and so here's where we have Dennis uh, trying to go on of like, well, hey, like, how about you and Lay? Like, I saw you out there, like, and Arnie's like, well, yeah, like we like one another, okay, uh, and ends up calling, listen to Mr. Cool. She happens to be the most beautiful girl in school, I hear. Uh, well, it's not what you think. You know, I really respect her mind, and she lusts after my body. What can I say? Oh, good, fun dialogue. I saw you guys at the football game. How'd you get that car fixed up all like that? Oh, just plain old fashioned hard work. I still, uh, I still can't keep it at home. Mom says it makes the yard look crowded. Who cares? It's a freaking car, man. Like my freaking neighbors over on this side of the house. Oh my god, they have like I think they have more than like 6 cars in the driveway. I'm like, oh my, like even at some point they're also like parking in the street. That's how many freaking cars they have. Really, if any of these people are going on and watching this, you have way too many cars in your drive-through or your driveway. It's ridiculous. And then also, like, I feel like they're also just kind of blocking things as well. Like, I'm just kind of concerned that at some point I'm not even going to be able to get my mail one day because they're going to have too many cars one night or something. I don't know. But anyways, uh, but if any, so they're also like Dennis is talking about how Arnie is surprised how his parents let him go on and register it, and I'm sure like finance it, whatever. Uh, But if anything, like Dennis asks Arnie to go, hey, like how'd you get them to like go and and decide to give in and to help you with that? And Arnie's like, well, yeah, I told him that I would have dropped out of school. And Dennis is like, really? Like you serious? And Arnie's like, uh, they just want me to they just don't want me to grow up. Then they'd have to face getting old. Has it ever occurred to you that parts of being a parent is trying to kill your kids? See you around, pal. Yeah, see you around. So, transition Arnie now with Lay or Lee. Uh, at movie theater or at the movie drive-in, because that makes more sense because car movie drive-in makes sense because they still have to be in the car to be able to have some horrific things go down. So both Lay or Lee, both Lee, both Arnie are copping a feel here, and at both their privatos, private parts, and it seems that Lee is pulling away from Arnie, and she has to go all the way to get out of the car, and then just like stand nearby a place where she's not getting rained on to then forcibly then Arnie has to turn around and make his way all the way to Lee It's like, well, hey, like, what's going on? Like, why aren't you wanting to go on and do anything? And it's like, what's the matter? What's wrong? And so she's like, well, there's something just about that car. I can't. Like, she can't in the car. She can't do anything like passionate or whatever in the car. And Arnie's like, what are you talking about? Why not? And she's like, well, I just hate that car. And she's also like, well, yeah, like you care more about that car than you do me. So Arnie, of course, is telling me, it's like, you know what? That's crazy. What are you talking about? And Lee is turning to Arnie. It's like, well, who do you spend more time with? I'm like, now that the car is actually like perfect, like, yeah, like, why is he spending even more time with the car? What does he need to really do? Like, besides maybe just going on and hoping that it doesn't get stolen. Uh, like, yeah, like, what is he doing uh, with the car now? Like, really, if anything, the only thing that actually makes sense to me is that actually Arnie is just doing his job, which technically is giving him money to be able to do whatever he wants. So again, that's probably where all his time is going, not going on and just kind of sitting in the car just doing nothing. Like, there has to just be more than that, but that's what maybe Lee is just thinking that it just is. So Arnie is like, you know what, Lee, like, you're gonna get cold, like, come back into the car, like. So they make their way back into the car, and we have Arnie that turns to Lee. It's like, well, you know what? Like, I thought girls were jealous about other girls, not cars. And so Lee is like, well, technically, since this car is named Christine, like, this car is technically a girl. So we also have Lei who's just gonna or punching the car, and so Arnie's like, well, hey, don't do that, don't. And Lee is like, well, like, you don't like me slapping your girl? And in all honesty, in my brain, what's kind of going off here is that Arnie had to go on and put a lot of effort and probably also a lot of money into this car. And for someone to go on and hate on it the way that Lee does, and then also like possibly even want to go on and like destroy the car or wreck the car or whatever, like eventually those goons do, I would probably be very upset also that no one likes his car, that everyone hates this car, and Arnie had to go on and make this such a passion project and no one likes it, that like that would probably go on and eventually just drive Arnie crazy. Cause it's just like, man, like, I spent all this time in the world and like no one um is to even want to even sit in this car because they think that some um like something's gonna badly rub off of them, which it won't. But so Arnie all of a sudden is to notice that one of the windshield wipers is stopped working. So Arnie gets out of the car to try and fix this, which all of a sudden then leads to then have Lee, who is starting to eat a little bit of her burger or her food or whatever. And all of a sudden she ends up choking because of the radio turning on, the lights flashing on, and so Lee is all of a sudden choking, and so Arnie is trying to get back into the car, and he realizes that the door is locked and he can't get into the car. We have Lee is desperately trying to unlock her car to try to get out, And we then have a guy who is kind of hearing the commotion nearby rush to then open this car, grab Lee, Heimlich her very just weirdly. There's a very weird, like, kind of Heimliching going on between the two of these people. But then again, this guy is saving her life. But again, it just looks really weird. It just does. But then also, Arnie's like, well, hey, what are you doing, man? What are you, like, get your hands off her. And so we're like, no, like, she is to go on and even realize to, or, 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 ah, Lee is to try to say to Arnie, it's like, oh, this guy was trying to save my life, as Arnie was just doing nothing. And Arnie's like, well, hey, like, I was trying to get back to the car, but it just, like, I couldn't. So, but then also Lee is to mention how, like, well, hey, like, when we're trying to make love or we're trying to do this, like, the car eventually stalls. Like, this car is jealous. So, as Lee and Arnie leave for the night, the two of them are kind of still upset between one another, and they're starting to argue. So Arnie asks Lee, it's like, well, hey, are you gonna be all right? Yeah, I'll be fine now. Now that she's out of the car. And so Arnie's like, well, yeah, you scared the hell out of me. Lee's like, then get rid of the car. I'm not going in that car again. Wait a minute. Don't you blame your choking on Christine. When I choked, something happened. The radio came on. Everything got bright. So what are you saying? I could have died, and you didn't even help. My door was locked. You didn't want that man, or you didn't want that man to help me. I thought he was attacking you. I could have done the Heimlich maneuver, but you didn't. And there are other things. And here's where she goes on. And the radio, it always has the old songs. And when they're making out, the car stalls. The car is jealous, obviously. And but Arnie goes on and is to take Lee here. It's like, you know what? I just feel that you're just sexually frustrated, and that's the reason why you're not going on. And 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 or she's frustrated, and so she's kind of taking all of that out on the car, and so really, in all honesty, if this girl was frustrated, she would probably go on and do something about it. She wouldn't go on and not do something about it. And also, I think maybe like Arnie saying that was trying to get a rise out of Lee to even like want some kind of intimacy, but clearly that didn't happen. So and so Arnie's just like, well, hey, I'm sorry, okay. Can I at least call you tomorrow? And Lee's like, I don't know. So Arnie gets back into his car and is trying to get the car started, and it stalls. So Arnie is to now try and convince Christine. It's like, well, hey, like everything is the same. It's all right. And then he turns the key, the car starts, and he's like, all right. So Arnie makes his way back to the do it yourself garage, and as Arnie is to go on and leave, here's where Buddy and his friends go on and wreak havoc on the car. They go on and they take screwdrivers and they are kind of scratching up the back of the car and also just stabbing their way into the interior. We have Buddy who's taking a sledgehammer to the windshield and also just the hood of the car the front of the car. And so we have them all go on and wreak havoc and this and that. So the following morning, or the following day, we have Arnie, we have Lee, and they're making their way back to the garage here. So we have Arnie that's telling Lee, it's like, well, hey, like I'm just gonna get my wallet from the car, like, and then we'll go. So they're like, hey, do you want to come with me? And Arnie's like, please, and Lee's like, okay. So Arnie's talking to Lee about possibly like sharing the same college, and Lee's like, yeah, I don't know about that. And Arnie's like, well, hey, we could take it as a sign of fate that we're meant to be together. And Lee's like, yeah, or no, and Arnie's like, well, yeah, I can help you. I can help you with math classes and vice versa. And so all of a sudden, Arnie is to notice that Christine is trashed, beaten to heck. And so Arnie is now holding on to Lee's hand and holding on to it so much so that Lee is to be like, oh my god, like freaking get away with me or get away from me. So Arnie then runs to his car, tries to like figure out how he can just kind of fit certain pieces back together, and Lee is like, oh, who did this? And Lee is trying to comfort Arnie, but then Arnie is to be like, don't touch me. Uh, this is just what you wanted, isn't it? Get away from her. Get away from her. Meaning Christine. So Arnie is now going on and he's at dinner with his parents, and it's like, oh, like I heard what happened with your car. Like I'm so sorry, Arnie. And Arnie's looking at his parents, is like, you know what, like this wouldn't have happened if you guys wouldn't have let me just park the car in your precious driveway. And and uh and so they're like, well, no, it's not fair. It's like, no, it's fair. Uh and also wanting to go on and talk about this like rational human beings and this and that. And Arnie's like, well, one of them even took on his dashboard, and uh and he's looking at his parents and is like, well, how is that rational? uh and so Michael, I believe, Arnie's father, is like, well, hey, like, you know what, how about like me and your mother have kind of decided, like, well, hey, how about we go on and buy you a new car? and and Arnie kind of throws this back in their face of like, well, like that just seems to be what everybody wants, just me to just get a new car. So Arnie leaves and he goes on and tells his parents, well, like, well, hey, I'm gonna go on to fix Christine. And as he makes his way to his bedroom, we have him getting cut off by his father, to the point to where they're having a conversation about being disrespectful, and that Arnie's father is telling Arnie to apologize to his mother. And so Arnie goes on and grabs his dad by the neck. And I'm like, man, that should be like, Arnie, you're going to get thrown out of this house, but they don't throw him out. And he grabs his father by the neck, and he's like, you know what, I'm going to hit the sack, and then he leaves. So Arnie is now talking to just Christine because he's the only one uh, that I guess could really talk to her. But then also, like, Christine is to probably be the only technically friend that Arnie has at this point now. So Arnie is telling Christine they can't hurt us anymore. Uh, Not if we work together. We'll show those shurs what we can do. So all of a sudden, Arnie is to start to hear the sound of the car like moving and maybe fixing itself. So Arnie then is to like get a good distance away from the car, and he's like, "Okay, show me." And so the car goes on and is to regenerate itself or resurrect itself, if a weird way of which to kind of state what's going on here is that the car is to reform itself or to transform back into more perfect condition, or even the glass is to make its way back on to the car, and so on and so forth. So this then turns around into the revenge movie, where then we go on to have Moochie, who is making his way off of this truck, to then be sought out by the Christine car. So we honestly have this stupid line brought by Moochie here. And so he goes on and says, like, say, you, Cunningham? Who other car would it be? And then on top of that, he's like, hey, you ain't mad, are you? Why does that line exist? Of course he's mad. Are you kidding me? This is the stupidest bit of dialogue here. Why does it exist? I don't know. But then there's also a lot of times when I go on and look at the dialogue in movies, I realize how repetitive it also is at some points. But again, this has got to be a really just dumb bit of dialogue, which I've already stated that. So Moochie eventually goes on and is to consistently be chased by by this car. He's consistently running. He's even going on and jumping over this fence, which of course the car like just bursts through, continues to chase after Moochie. So Moochie is to try and run through areas that are very narrow to where this car is just kind of buckling, but still trying to get to Moochie, to the point of now Moochie now being in this uh just kind of dead end alley and being forced in this very small space, and so small so that the Christine car, it seems, cannot be driven any further to get to Moochie. And Moochie's like, okay, man, like, you better get out of your car and face me. And the car decides, no, 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 no. I'm just going to continue on and force myself through this one place that I should not be able to cram myself into, but I'm just going to continue to do this so I can kill you. So that's what the car does, and it ends up going on and further pushing to where it goes on and is to just kind of cut Moochie in half. So transition to now, seemingly Thanksgiving, November 23rd, and Arnie is to bring in some cans of liquor, and we then have to realize that there has been quite a bit of time have passed between both Dennis and Arnie here. Like, well, hey, where have you been? And Arnie is asking Dennis, like, well, hey, did you hear about Moochie? Uh, Almost makes you feel sorry for the little bastard. So Dennis ends up asking Arnie, it's like, well, hey, like, how is Christine? How is she coming? And Dennis is like, oh, Cherry, I spent a load of money on her, but she's perfecto now. yeah, she's so perfecto that she regenerates herself. So, and Dennis is like, well, I heard that she was totaled. That sounds kind of funny coming from you that all of a sudden she's perfecto now. And Arnie's like, well, like all I had to do was just kind of clean up some broken glass. It wasn't so bad. So Dennis is like, well, hey, like I bet you $100 it was Buddy. And Arnie's like, maybe. Uh, and so Dennis is like, so what if you fix it up and they just destroy it again? And Arnie's like, he won't do it again. And Dennis is like, well, what does that mean? And so Arnie's like, well, I gotta go. Hope you didn't think I could hang around here all day. And Dennis turns to Arnie. It's like, well, yeah, that's you, Arnie, always in demand. He doesn't really have a girlfriend. He doesn't really have a friend anymore, but he's always just in demand. We possibly still have Darnell giving technically Arnie like tasks to do, but rationally, like Arnie shouldn't actually be in all that demand. But again, like I guess we just have to go on and just kind of figure out how to just kind of um, just further separate these characters to make them more and more upset with one another now. So, but Arnie turns to Dennis here and says, "Happy Thanksgiving." So Arnie makes his way back to his car to then be met by Junkus, who is to be this detective. Like, oh, lean machine. Uh, and Junkus is saying to Arnie, like, hey, let you out early because Arnie is in school. And Arnie's like, yeah, that's right. Uh, uh, and so the detective goes on, introduces himself. He's a state police. Uh, so Arnie is going on and telling this detective, it's like, well, hey, I'm just missing a study hall. Like, I got to get to work. And so the detective is like, well, like, I don't really care about that. I just want to ask about the car. And so the detective goes on, Junkus, like, well, hey, you do nice body work, Arnie. Like, I thought this thing was totaled. Why does everybody seem to know about this car getting totaled for some goofy reason? Uh, and Arnie is like, well, like, who told you that? Why? Well, everybody. The local police, your mom and dad, your girl. Cute girl, by the way. It wasn't anywhere near as bad as it looks. The report said they punched holes in the body. Damned if I can see the fill. And then Arnie turns like, well, it's right over here and there. He goes on and tweets about the door, about how he had to replace the color, and, and the paint doesn't match. So, uh, but the detective is like, well, what a hell of a job. And Arnie's like, well, thank you very much. So, as Arnie's to get back into his car, the detective is to just kind of be in Arnie's way. And so Arnie's kind of revving his car and then gets back out of the car. And, and so Arnie's like, well, hey, what do you want? And so, Junkus is like, well, like, I really like this shade of red. Didn't think they made this anymore. And Arnie's like, well, yeah, they still make this shade. It's like, well, yeah, they must. And Arnie's like, well, yeah, I bought the shade, didn't I? And so Junkus is like, well, where? And Arnie's like, well, Bakerado. It's like, well, hey, you still got the receipt? And he's like, no, I tossed it. So Junkus is like, well, it's funny, cigarette. Uh, or no, it's funny, cigarette. You want a cigarette? Uh, Usually when somebody trashes the car, we get photos. And so Arnie's like, well, yeah, they didn't really trash it, okay? Uh, and the detective is like, well, that's not what Lee said. She was, uh, she was shaken up, giving me all the details. Uh, she broke down crying. One of the uh, perpetrators defecated on your dashboard. I would have thought that would have made you madder than hell. Uh, I would have thought that you would have definitely would have wanted to report that. And Arnie is like, well, crap wipes off. And the detective is like, well, yeah, like kind of like how Moochie got wiped off, didn't he? And Arnie's like, well, I don't know. And it's like, you don't know? No? All right. And he's like, oh, Scout's honor? He's like, I'm not a scout. Uh, and that's where we find out that the kid was cut in half. Moochie was cut in half. Um, they had to scrape his legs off with a shovel. And he's like, well, yeah, isn't that what they do with crap? Like, they scrape it off with a shovel. It's like, well, don't get smart with me, kid. Your girlfriend is a lot convincing than you are. And then it's like, well, hey, Arnie's like, well, hey, she's not my girlfriend. And since when is it against the law to fix up your own car? When somebody else busts it open? Hmm. Since never. Then get off my back, okay? So, Lee calls, or no, wait, or no, wait, so Arnie calls Lee, and here's where we're realizing that this conversation is going to lead to them breaking up here. So, uh, Arnie is saying like, well, hey, hi Lee, look, I need to talk to you, I need to see you, Arnie, um, seriously, uh, uh, and Lee's like, I don't know, and Arnie's like, well, look, I love you, Lee, I think we deserve one more try, and so the whole conversation is like, well, yes or no, and and Lee's like, well, hey, don't do this to me, and Arnie's like, well, hey, just be straight with me, okay? Uh, you've had it right. Um, well, f you, bear, and then he's like, Lee, as he tries to call her back and this and that. So realizing that he's made a horrible mistake, so Arnie goes on and is to do the only real thing that he has really left to do, and is to just murder some folks again. So we have Buddy and we have Rich, and the two of them are getting in this car, and they're realizing they're getting followed by uh, by Arnie's car, Christine. So they're going on and they're putting their high beams on. Christine is. And so Rich ends up giving Christine the finger, and Buddy tries to go on and figure out ways to try and ditch the Christine car, going on and just backing up, or going on and driving as fast as they can to get away from this car, but it's unavoidable. So both Rich and Buddy make their way uh, to this place where they're just kind of fixing up cars, and it's kind of just car shop or whatever. And here's where they have Vanderberg there, and it's like a car shop, but it's also like a gas station. So like they, I guess, really want to just hit two birds with one stone here to just try to figure out a way to make this place have a really big explosion by the tail end of this, to try to make sure that they go on and they can get to enough people as they get to. So the Christine car crashes into Buddy's car, and that goes on and takes up both Rich and Vanderberg is just kind of limping out of the shop here. So Buddy is thinking that he's going to go on and he's going to uh, face off against Cunningham here, but there's no real face to face fight. But instead, uh, as the shop and everything starts to light up a blaze, we would have Buddy who's realizing, like, okay, I need to get that out of here. This is going to get a real big explosion. So he starts running off. And we're thinking that this could possibly be a thing that goes on and destroys Christine here, but it doesn't. And instead, we now have a entire car that's like engulfed in flames and is now chasing after Buddy on the road to then run him over and then make Buddy just this flaming ball of mess. So Christine makes its way back to the do it yourself garage. And Darnell is going on and seeing that this Christine is making its way back to the garage, all while also Darnell is calling for if Arnie is to have gone on and went in his car to pick up certain specific parts. And so, realizing that Arnie is not inside this car, Darnell is grabbing his shotgun and seeing who is actually inside Arnie's car. And as Darnell is to realize it's seemingly having no one inside this car, Darnell just goes inside the car, and the car all of a sudden is to lift up the seat so much so that it ends up just killing Darnell. And so the following day, as Arnie is to make his way back to the do it yourself garage, he then is to be met by Junkus, who is going on and talking about how Darnell is dead and he had a shotgun with him, and where was Arnie that whole time. And Arnie's like, well, hey, I have this receipt for all these parts, and like I couldn't get back to the garage last night because I was too tired, and so like I just kind of stayed home. And so Junkus is just kind of forced to buy this story. And so and then also like the alibi is technically sound and is technically there. So and then also uh we have Junkus who is telling uh Arnie here how all these other people are going on and being dead, but again, Arnie had an alibi. Uh but also the detective is to tell Arnie, it's like, well, I guess there's not going to be anybody who's going to be trashing your car anymore. Uh, but if any, but anything, Arnie's like, well, hey, like all I know is I got a Cadillac full of parts and I have to go to school, and the detective is like, well, hey, we'll take care of the caddy. Uh, I don't want you touching it. Okay, so like, I guess that's kind of just kept as evidence. But Arnie's like, well, hey, I know what's going on. So Lee is going on and calling Dennis, and Dennis's sister is like, oh, it's a girl. Here you go. So Dennis talks to Lee. It's like, oh, hey, Happy New Year. Oh, yeah, Happy New Year. And so Lee is like, well, hey, can I come over? I need to talk to you. And and it's about Arnie. Uh, and it's about Christine. So the two of them start talking. So Lee tells Arnie that she's afraid, or Lee tells Dennis here that she is afraid for Arnie. And and Dennis is like, well, hey, I thought this was about Christine. And Lee is asking Dennis, like, well, hey, what do you know about the car? And and so he mentions about how the guy had prior choked to death in the Christine car, and Lee asks Dennis, like, well, how do you know about that? And the guy who had sold uh, Arnie the car told him that, and just came out and told him. And we also have Lee, who's just kind of concerned that possibly she's the next target on the chopping block of possibly going to die because of this car. And Dennis is to just comfort Lee here, like, well, hey, like Arnie would never go on and do that to you, not in a million years. And Lee is telling Dennis here, it's like, well, I don't think Arnie is Arnie anymore. And Lee's like, well, like it doesn't matter, like, uh, cause it's the car. Like, there's something wrong with the car. And Dennis is like, well, okay, like, how about we do this? Like, I'm gonna go to New Year's. I'm gonna go with New Year's, at Arnie's. So, if anything, uh, how about I go on and I do this? Uh, like we meet every year. Let me pause here for a second. All right, I want to apologize about all the pausings. My apologies. There probably is a number of reasons for all those, but still, probably really annoying. But I'm sorry. So, with that said, let's get back into this. So, after Dennis is to be talking with Lee, he then goes into the car with Arnie, and Arnie's looking at Dennis and his crutches, like, well, yeah, man, like you really have a handle on those bad boys now. So Arnie is in his car and he's drinking beer heavily to the point where he's forcing Dennis, like, well, hey, man, like have a beer with me. He's like, hey, man, I thought you liked beer. Drink beer. So here's where we have the conversation about them like toasting to the to the to the death of all of the uh, supposedly crappers or whatever. And Dennis going on, I'm like, you know what? Like, let's not toast to that. And he's like, well, what should we toast to? Yeah, like friendship and this and that. And Arnie's like, friendship. Oh yeah, that's a good idea. That's a great idea. So they go on, and Arnie is to just kind of let go of his hands, and Arnie is just kind of not even like taking any real control of the car. And Dennis is like, "Oh my god, like come on, man!" And Arnie's like, "No, no, no, no." So they end up going on to this curve, and Arnie shows Dennis like, "Well, hey, look at this perfect alignment. No other car can do this kind of thing." So eventually, the further two of them go on and they talk here, we have Arnie who goes into the whole thing about how uh, like, well, hey, like uh anyway. So Dennis is like, well, yeah, it's this effing car. And Arnie's like, well, hey, I know you're jealous. And Dennis is like, we'll always be friends as long as you stick with me. And anyway, no, wait. Arnie's like, yeah, you always be my friend as long as you stick with me. And uh, you know what happens to the people that don't. And Dennis is like, no, what does happen? And Arnie turns in and is like, well, hey, let's not kid ourselves, Dennis. So Arnie goes on and just kind of says that all of them are all to be the people that don't. And Dennis is like, well, hey, well, Lee is on your side. And Dennis is like, or Arnie's like, oh yeah, like she cares a lot. And so Arnie goes on and has this conversation about like, well, hey, let me tell you a little something about love. It has a ferocious appetite. It eats everything. Friendship, family. It kills me how much it eats. But I'll tell you something else. Uh, Feed it right. It can be a beautiful thing, and that's what we have. When someone believes in you, you can do anything in the universe. When you believe right back uh, in that someone, watch out, world, because no one can stop you. Nobody ever. And so Dennis goes on like, oh, so like you and Lee, like you both feel that way upon one another. And Arnie turns to Dennis like, no, like that's not me talking about Lee, like that's me talking about Christine. So we even go on to then have Arnie that is kind of turning into another lane of cars to see if people are going to go on and like crash against him because Arnie doesn't care. Like his car will just regenerate right back and theirs won't. So, and again, this is where Arnie throws the line about a whole new car smell is not as good as Pussy. So after that whole scene, we then the day after have Dennis that is carving into Arnie's car to meet him at Darnell's tonight. So Dennis and Lee come up with this plan, like, okay, well, hey, like we're gonna have him meet us here, and we're gonna take him out with the bulldozer, and Lee, how about you go on and like you're in the office and like you're hitting buttons and this and that. So Dennis tries to get everything ready, but like really, like things just go freaking haywire anyways. So eventually, then forcing uh, Dennis and Lee to be both in the bulldozer together, and plus also like Dennis can't really work the bulldozer really all that well anyways because of his knee. So they're also even having the question. It's like, well, hey, uh, well, hey, like, what if Arnie doesn't come? It's like, regardless, like, since Christine knows what's going on, Christine's gonna come if Arnie doesn't. Either way, like, if they get one and the other, like, that'll be perfect because uh, if they get Arnie, then, like, at some point, Christine will come and vice versa. But they'll get two of them together. So Dennis tells Lee to get in the office, and as Lee steps out of the bulldozer, all of a sudden the car comes out of nowhere and is to surprise Lee. And so uh, Dennis then is to be yelling for Lee. Lee is trying to get in the office, and so she jumps and tries to reach for a to get to a higher spot where the car doesn't go on and attack her, and the car crashes into this other car, which then leads then the bulldozer to then try and protect Lee, so the car doesn't go on and start attacking Lee. So, but then again, eventually we do, of course, have uh, the bulldozer and uh, and Christine that are to just kind of separate, and Christine goes off in the shadows, and we realize that Arnie is inside Christine. So Dennis all of a sudden is having problems working his bulldozer because he realizes that he needs to kind of hotwire it again. So then that leads then Christine to try and find Lee and crash into the office to try to get to her, which then leads Arnie, I believe, flying out of the windshield and is to be hugging Lee as we then realize that Arnie has a piece of glass that is stuck in his chest and he's going to die, sadly enough, here. So, as Christine is to realize that now Arnie is dead, here is where Christine's like, well, hey, I'm going to exact my revenge. And so she's queuing up certain songs on the radio where it's like, I will always love you kind of songs and this and that, just kind of as a tribute to now dead Arnie here. So Lee makes a break for it, and Dennis kind of pokes his head out of the bulldozer for Lee to tell Dennis that Arnie is dead. So we have Dennis that goes on to then try to fight against Christine, and that then leads to Lee going back into the bulldozer with Dennis here, and the two of them are kind of working the bulldozer, trying to crush the car, and it seems that eventually this is all to be successful. And so what ends up happening is the detective and Lee and Dennis are all seeing now this car that is seemingly have been crushed into this cube, and the detective is going on and telling his friend or telling Lee and telling Dennis like, well, hey, like you guys are heroes. Uh, like don't feel I wouldn't feel so bad if I were you. And the two of them are going on like, well, like we didn't save Arnie, so we're not exactly heroes. It's like, well, yeah, we didn't do so hot. And the detective is like, well, hey, like some things can't be helped. Uh, some people too can't be helped. So they go on and they hear off in the distance like some music being played, and they possibly think that it has something to do with the Christine car. But then all of a sudden they see this guy with this boombox or this radio, and he's playing that music. And so Lee turns to Dennis and says, well, God, I hate rock and roll. And so we all of a sudden see that the Christine cube is starting to move certain bits of its pieces, and we are to possibly conclude here that there might be a sequel, which never happened. But maybe at some point there may be a remake, who knows? Logically, I would go on and assume that I'm surprised that like Stephen King didn't like make a sequel to every single one of his stories to just either make some more money or really just feel that he probably had more to tell. But then also we have like the Shining and Doctor Sleep and stuff like that, so that technically is a sequel. But anyways, I'm gonna get the heck out of here because I realized that I've already been talking 30 minutes over what was to have actually been the original runtime of this film. And so yeah, definitely made a lot of mistakes in this review, and also I at least just tried to make and put a review out there. At least I also really should have gone on and figured out a way to somehow do this review a lot earlier than I did. That was to be the big problem because logically, I'm doing this right around the time that I actually should be sleeping. So that is to really be the problem here. Um, but if anything, I'm going to get out of here now so I can upload this and hopefully get some kind of sleep. So with that said, goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.